Well, hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Sharon Vornholt, and thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm happy to have back brand photographer Natalie Jennings for a second show. So last time we talked about using our brand photography, but we want to dive a little bit deeper into it and talk about why personal branding is so important. And Natalie's going to give you her top 5 tips for a successful branding photo shoot. Now, Natalie got a graduate degree in education, but ended up going in a completely different direction. She quit her teaching job and opened Jennings Photo. And this has allowed her to travel the world to build quite a portfolio. She's written for, she's worked with major publications like The Atlantic, Huffington Post. I met her through Podfest, and she always pops up at different podcast events to take headshots, which is really a brilliant strategy. So welcome to the show, Natalie.
Thanks so much, Sharon. It's great to be back.
Yeah, it was fun last time, and I love to talk about branding because branding is it's so much more than just your logos and fonts and colors, and it's the way people feel about you. And I think people are really beginning to realize that professional images play a huge part in creating this overall persona. The days of just putting a headshot on a website, they're just really over. So I'm anxious to talk about this and how to build a visual brand. And I really hope that people take away from this how important it is. But I just really touched on your background. So for anybody that might not know who you are, tell people a little bit more in depth about how you got your start.
Yeah, so I did my graduate work in education, and I was a high school English teacher. I traveled a lot. I taught abroad, and then I had always had an interest in photography and decided to explore it a little bit more when it became more accessible to have a website, for example, and a blog. And I just started kind of experimenting and publishing photos, and slowly grew my business and quit my teaching job. I just found that I loved it. Not only did I love being my own boss, but I just really loved the work and the people and the adventure. And it's been almost 10 years now, and over 200 weddings, and a lot of other shoots, dozens and dozens, hundreds of family shoots, and hundreds of headshot shoots. I've definitely just been going at it pretty hard, but really enjoying it. So the branding aspect of it has really started to emerge in the last couple of years as social media and other things have played a bigger role in people's personal brands and sort of the face of their businesses. And so I saw sort of a need there, especially since a lot of people hate updating their photos. And it's so important to the consumer experience to have a good visual first impression online. So I just started kind of moving in that direction, and we've been growing our branding part of the studio, Jennings Photo, for the last couple of years now.
Well, I think it's brilliant because people finally know that this is something that they should be focusing on. Your website is beautiful, and for anybody that hasn't been over to Jennings Photo and looked at their website, it is drop dead beautiful. So
thank you.
You can really get a feel for how you should approach this, I think, by looking at Natalie's work. So let's dive into the 5 tips. And number 1 is know your ideal client. So let's talk about that one.
Sure. One of the things that, this is sort of business 101, but when you're creating anything online or on a social media account for your ideal client to see, you obviously want to know who that person is. I think sometimes we're sort of just throwing stuff out there without any thought to who we're creating the content for. And this includes your own images of yourself. What are you putting out there? Who do you want to see it? And then as a result of them seeing it, what do you want them to feel and what do you want them to do with that information? And if you're targeting the right people, you'll hopefully achieve the results that you're after. But really knowing who that client is, depending on, again, your industry, it's an incredibly important first step. And it's one that we talk about in our our branding consults with our clients all the time. Who are you trying to reach with these images?
It's really important to I think that your images portray the message that you're trying to get across. You know, I see people that have confusing branding. They're in a more of a what I call an ordinary situation where they dress nice, but they dress ordinary. And then they, you know, maybe, well, real estate investors are a perfect example. You're not going to show up to look at a grubby house in a three-piece suit, but they'll do this branding photo shoot and they look like they're just come out of GQ or something. And then when they show up at a house, people are just genuinely confused about, you know, who is this person? So if you want to portray yourself as being the accessible and professional investor, but not the corporate guy, if all your branding is I'm in a three-piece suit, it's very confusing. And that was really just kind of an off-the-wall example, but maybe you even have some more of those. But you got to really nail your ideal client, your avatar.
No, that's right. And I think you make a great point. I think that there's been sort of a cultural understanding or acceptance of like professional photos people immediately think of suits.
Yes.
And that sort of look, as it's obviously considered professional attire, but that doesn't necessarily equate to what message you're trying to share with people. Let's say you're a veterinarian and you have a private practice and you want to show like that you love animals and that you're a gregarious, kind person and that your pet will be safe with you. You're not probably going to do all of your photos in a stuffy, you know,
No.
not that there aren't great photos in suits. Certainly not trying to say that, but in this particular example that I'm thinking of, we brought a couple of dogs on set, and the doctor was just wearing regular clothes that she would normally wear and just playing around with the dogs and having a great time. And I think that was, that portrayed her personality much more than if she would have put her lab coat on and done all of the images.
Right. Yeah, I think that's so true. And then, so if you have to be really, really clear on who you're serving and what is the feeling you want them to get. Then, like you named it, you're really friendly, you know, gregarious. Your dog is safe with me. Love these pets, but you can't get that feeling from a staged photo in a lab coat backed up against the wall.
That's right. And you have to remember, if you're keeping your ideal client in mind, what you want them to do and feel when they first come across these images, you are in your own head about who you are and what you do because you live with yourself. You know exactly what's going on with your business and the ideas you have for your business and all these great plans that you have. But a stranger has no idea who you are.
Right.
So what are these qualities that you want them to really understand about you when they first see you? For example, on my own website, on my About page, I have a short little video of me walking around on the beach in Hawaii because I've lived there for many, many years. It's my second home. I love it. And it's just a great little snippet of sort of what represents who I am and not just me kind of posing and not really doing anything.
That's a great idea. I need one of those because that's my love is the beach. I don't have a single beach picture. Darn. So let's talk about colors, consistency, the style, the overarching strategy that you have for that.
Sure. So this is the second tip I have for preparing, and it's pretty obvious, but really thinking about if you have a brand and if you have brand colors, how your photo shoot, how your outfits and maybe the set and props and everything that you're going to bring into the photo shoot, how that works with your brand. And I think the biggest thing to consider here is just consistency. Brand consistency is important in all fields. And if you have sort of random disjointed photos, I mean, sort of think about it like decorating a room. If you open up like a magazine, like a decorating magazine, you can see this overarching consistency, and that's what draws us into these beautiful living rooms and kitchens and things like that. And it's the same thing with your brand. You want to have, you know, the photos that the photographer takes of you. If you're standing in front of a blue building wall, but your brand colors are yellow and pink, like it's just going to look kind of weird. So
Yeah.
I know it may seem obvious, but it's certainly something that that helps your brand tremendously if you can be consistent.
So on your, when you talk about your consistency in your brand, then if you were going to do a brand photo shoot, you would possibly have different clothing on in the different pictures. So, which we'll talk about later, but doing pictures over time, but you still want to have that consistency so that when they, like you said, if your website is red and you're in baby blue all the time, it's going to look odd.
Sure. Unless you want that contrast of like the red branding colors and you're always in baby blue, but I think it's just being thoughtful about it and how it's going to come across. There's a lot of information out there about Instagram in particular these days and how your feed looks to someone when they first come to your profile. And if it's all over the place, people aren't as likely to follow you. So I think it's the same. I mentioned this, I think, in the last interview, but the way your brain processes visual information is faster than any other way, like, you know, by reading and sound and everything. We process images very, very quickly. I don't have the actual stats on it right now. I had them last time, but you know, that impression where someone's coming to your website for maybe 2, 3, 5 seconds, it's incredibly important to be consistent.
And it's really important that you grab them with whatever they see, that you have to grab them with that. And I think that's something that most people struggle with. For you, it's obviously you have a talent for that, but it is something that people struggle with, to get the images right on when, as they pertain to their brand, and get them even to putting them on their site and locating them. It is you need an idea of what you want it to end up being.
That's right. And consistency really at the end of the day just portrays that you have your stuff together, that you're together and you're organized, and you have, you know, that if you're disorganized with your online presence, that also affects your brand, because your brand is not just colors and fonts, it's the user experience as well. And so if someone feels like they don't get what's going on, they're going to attribute that to reflect on how you do your job or whatever service you're providing. So, you know, the more consistent you can be, the better all around you'll be sort of received when people first come across your stuff.
I agree with that completely. And now tip number 3 is on crafting your story. And boy, this one is a hard one for people. It's what story do you want to tell with your visual images? What I see is that people just slap up a few pictures and move on. But your pictures really, really do tell a story. So how do you craft that story if you're going out to do a photo shoot? Where do you begin that process?
Sure, and I can use the vet as an example. Again, we wanted to have a story of one of the stories, I should say. And I use the word story. You can think of it as a scene or a setting, or, you know, some sort of setup for the shoot. But I like to think of it as a story, because what are you trying to convey to people? And in the case of the vet, we wanted to just show warmth. We wanted it to feel like another day at home with the animals, really casual. And we wanted to the story was like, I love hanging out with my animals and I love just relaxing and having a good time with them. That was sort of like the thread of it. And so thinking about each of the settings that you're in, maybe you're a chef and you want to show, the process of creating your favorite meal, but is that in the evening is there like wine, and is it low light, and do you want to have like sort of a mood associated with the photos, or is it like a bright, cheery breakfast? You want people to feel energized and excited when they make their breakfast or eat their food. There's just these little subtleties that when you understand the story around it, along with the tip number 1, your ideal client, and what you want them to feel and who you're speaking to, then you can sort of craft these photo scenes a little bit more accurately to your brand. So
then if you let's say whatever we'll use the vet as an example. If she is very family oriented and she has pets, she might have a picture of her and her children walking the dog, or
That's right.
she's a real person. So that would be one example that popped into my mind.
That's right. That's right. And you can be, so you can, say you're a realtor and, you think like, oh, I need to be in a suit in a house because like I need to, and that may be one of your stories. Like I am a professional, I know what I'm doing, but maybe you want people to know that you're really approachable. So it's just you sitting, laughing over a cup of coffee or something, something like that, just to show that you like to just get to know your clients and that you're open to conversation, that sort of thing. That would be another story thread.
Right. So it's your overall branding is a combination of the stories.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So tip number 5, boy, this one is a hard one for people who don't like doing photo shoots.
Oh, I think we have 4 left.
We have 4.
Yep.
Yeah, we skipped 4.
Yep.
I did. So you're right. Consider where you use your photos. So this is, again, back to your story.
That's right. So again, if you're using your photos just sort of one time, like you just need a big banner for a couple of pages on your website and that's all you're planning on doing, that's going to be a very different approach. The photographer is going to take a different approach than if you're, say, doing a whole bunch of photos that you want to post consistently day after day to sort of share a narrative maybe over time. So in the first case, if you just want a couple of really, really nice banner images for your website, you're going to really take a lot more time to make sure that all the elements of your story are represented in that one image. If you're posting regularly and blogging a lot and using a lot of imagery in your brand, you have a little bit more leeway with how your brand sort of develops over the course of all this content that you're sharing, if that makes sense. So considering where you're going to use your photos is just important because that's part of how you're going to reach your ideal client.
I think too, with the photos, sometimes it gets confusing. So you've got your photos on your blog. When do you use those photos and mix them up in Instagram, in your marketing? So you actually end up needing, first of all, more photos than you think you need. But most people are starting from ground zero. They really are. So this is like, they understand the photo shoot now, but it's like, okay, you're telling me that I need a whole bunch of stuff?
And we can talk about that a little bit more, but one of the approaches we take is a sort of get to know our clients over the course of a long period of time approach, where we do quarterly or biannual photo shoots so that we can tell these stories over time and people can build a collection of on-brand professional photos that are, marketed the right way, and not feel overwhelmed like they have to get it all done in the first shoot if they change, if their business changes, if their approach changes. So
okay.
Yeah.
Did you go ahead?
No, that's it. So just really considering how and where you'll use your photos will sort of influence how you go about the shoot and how many photos you get back from the photographer.
The whole process. So let me ask you this: is there a length of time someone should allot for a photo shoot, or an amount of pictures they should hope to get from? Are there some guidelines on that?
Well, it depends on what you're using them for. So the photographer should be able to let you know how much time will be needed for your needs. So again, if you're looking for only a handful of photos just to refresh your website, if that's your need, the photographer will certainly let you know based on that initial consult how much time is probably going to be needed for the shoot.
Okay.
If you're going to do like consistent stuff over time with a lot of different stories and a lot of different settings, of course that's going to take a bit longer. But I would say, I've done shoots as short as 30 minutes, just meeting up with a client and doing a few things at a cafe, and then you can go out over days and days. So it just sort of depends on the need.
Okay. So here I'm going to get back to this number 5, be yourself. Well, that is like I mean, we talked a little bit about the dress, and what to wear, but photo shoots are hard for people. They're not hard for you. You photograph very well, but for most people, it's not their comfort zone unless you're a teenager and grew up in the world of selfies and Instagram.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, my fifth tip is being yourself, and it sometimes these seem obvious, when I'm crafting these lists, but it's such an important thing to consider, especially if you're one of those people that's not comfortable in front of a camera, which is almost everybody. Everybody feels weird. Do I look good? Like, how do I look? It's just constant. But one of the things that really changes the energy in a shoot is if someone's wearing something and done their makeup and done their hair in a way that they normally never ever do. It's one thing to get dressed up and have maybe a little more makeup than usual. I mentioned this in the last show. The camera removes a lot of makeup. That's why makeup for television and movies is so heavy, because it looks like you're wearing less once the photo's taken. But that aside, you don't want to be doing a bunch of things that you don't normally do, because you'll start to behave differently. You'll start to sort of feel maybe uncomfortable if you're not used to it. Like, how does this outfit look on me? Or high heels, or this,
jacket feels funny.
Yeah, people start fidgeting with their hair if it's totally different. And so I'm not saying to not have a little fun with, sprucing up your image if that's something that interests you, but just making sure that you're true to yourself. Pick some things out of your wardrobe that you've worn to work before, or that you've worn just on a regular day, just something that makes you feel comfortable, that you, can relax in.
Okay. So, yeah, that makes sense. And I think we're back to, again, just being true to yourself and being true to your brand. If you get all dressed up in I never really understood, a lot of people they wear their hair down and casual, and then they'll go for a photo shoot and they get this big fancy hairdo and up. And even I've watched teenagers do it for dances, and then they'll go, it's pretty, but it's not me. And I'll go, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's not the way you're no longer comfortable. Yes, you're all dressed up and you look good, but you're not comfortable.
Right. And whether you're a doctor or a chef or a realtor, whatever your service or your industry is, at the end of the day, your ideal client wants to know, like, and trust you. That relationship, it doesn't matter what you're selling or what you're offering. If people know, like, and trust you, and you're connecting with your audience in an authentic way, that will do it. That will do the trick. And then you've opened the door where people are just interested in your service at that point. But, thinking more about being yourself in all aspects, like we've talked about, maybe your photo shoot is you with your kids and your dog. And that even if you're a doctor or a chef or a realtor, those photos may really, really connect with the people that you're trying to reach. So just thinking about it outside of, like, what you said, that, like, I'm going to put my suit on and stand in front of a desk, that's relevant, but it's not necessarily showing people who you are.
Right. So once you've given people really 5 great tips to get them started. So once you're ready for a photo shoot, I think one thing to consider is to work with a photographer you feel comfortable with. If you're not comfortable, it doesn't matter how good the photographer is. You kind of have to be a fit, and that's how do people go about knowing if they're going to be a fit? Do you do a meet and greet, or how does that work?
Yeah, so with the branding shoots in particular, same with weddings or anything like a big shoot or a big undertaking. Generally, at least in my case, you'll have a consult on the phone or a video chat, and so that's really the sort of first stage of, hey, can I help you? Do you want to work with me? And at that point, I think both people get a good sense of, should we work together on this larger project? So part of our branding approach is to have a planning consult.
Right.
So that's a huge part of getting comfortable with each other before the camera even comes out. Mm-hmm. But yeah, making sure that you have a conversation, making sure that the photographer can communicate back to you what you're trying to to achieve. And also, it's kind of like when you go to get your hair cut, you know, it's like, if you're trying to describe it, but you don't have like an example, you know, you want to, sometimes you know that your hairdresser knows exactly what you're talking about, like just do that same thing again. And sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know if they got what I'm trying to say. So you want to show them a picture. So, you know, you can even be prepared that way, where you have a couple of images you've taken off Pinterest where you're like, hey, I really like this vibe, you know, and the photographer can then go, you know what, that's exactly in line with what we do. Let's talk, you know, more about that. But, you know, just having that initial communication.
Which is so much easier now that you have things like Zoom. I think back to the time when you would just show up in somebody's studio and, oh my gosh, that was so uncomfortable. You didn't know that person, and they would slap down the 20 backgrounds, and oh my gosh, that was so different than what we're talking about today. I think that's where people from my generation got scarred, was in those settings. It was just so weird, and or maybe you're there by the fake Christmas tree, or I don't know.
And it's certainly not the setting where you feel like you can be yourself. So that's totally understandable. I get that. But yeah, another way to, you know, kind of make that connection, to sort of feel more comfortable about everything, is if you like your photographer's vibe and you like their portfolio, don't stress too much about, you know, how the photos are going to turn out. Just, you know, follow these 5 steps, think about your story, and be yourself, and trust your photographer, because if they have a good portfolio, and if you feel comfortable with them, and they ask you to stand somewhere where to you it looks like we're going to stand in the middle of the street, like, you know, just trust them, because they probably know how to make it look really exciting on camera. And just relax, you know, enjoy yourself.
Okay, I'll tell them, just relax and enjoy yourself. So one thing that I did find interesting from that we talked about before was building a portfolio of pictures, and maybe doing seasonally or quarterly, adding to those. Once you've got these photos, are they good? Let's say that I did that, and every quarter for the next 12 months, I added some photos. Then how long are those photos good? Are they good for a year? Or do you just need to add a few a year? How does all that play out in a brand strategy where photographs are concerned?
Sure. So a couple of things, just to sort of readdress what you brought up. Like, one of our approaches to clarify is that we work with a lot of our clients over a long period of time. Not only does that help us to get to know them and their brand, but it keeps things fresh for them if they're posting a lot of things regularly, particularly on social media. So we'll do quarterly shoots like you suggested. And then it just sort of comes down to how much is your brand changing over time? You know, again, so if you're a vet or you're a chef, chances are the chef is coming out with newer things more often than, you know, the vet's brand is probably not changing too much over time.
Okay.
The bigger thing is if you personally change a lot over time. So some of us, generally, I'd say within 5 years, we don't change too much. You know, if you've lost a ton of weight or gained a ton of weight, or, you know, really, really changed your look, then I think that would be a really good indicator of a time to update your photos, because the know, like, and trust factor is part of, you know, when you meet that person in person, you don't want to go, oh, you know,
oh, yeah, we've done that. Oh,
you don't look like that anymore, or whatever. And it's not a, you know, I mean, it sounds like a really, really big deal, but it's more like you just want your audience to feel like they can relate to you and trust you. So I would say every few years, you know, especially, but again, that's assuming that you've gone through maybe a year of working with a photographer on something.
And you have a package or
that's right.
A group of photos. That's reasonable, because I think people can wrap their brain around that they're not going to have to, for the rest of their life, do a quarterly photo shoot. Because then they start thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do that. So, but I think that was a big aha moment for me when we talked about that previously, that and it's a great idea to, you know, aside from your look, just to have a collection. And I love the seasonal aspect of it, especially if you have seasons.
That's right.
Some places you don't have seasons. It's hot and hotter, but So, but I know you have seasons, I have seasons, so that's a great idea. Well, thank you so much for coming back on
Yeah.
today.
Yep.
And I know,
of course. Thank you.
it's fun. And I know you have a great freebie for people. So tell them a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've put together sort of an overview of everything that you should consider about doing a personal branding shoot. And you can just go to jennings.photo/branding, and it's just a PDF that you can glance through. But I think if this is something that you're considering, this will really help frame what we're talking about for you a lot more. And then you can get in touch with me if you'd like to explore a consult, or at least have a little bit more information about how to move forward.
And Natalie makes her way around the country, so you might say, hey, Natalie, when are you going to be in my area? Also, one last thing, you have a podcast.
I do. I help photographers build photo businesses. So I'm a photo business coach. And the podcast is called Photo Business Help, which is incredibly clever.
Well, I will put all of that in the show notes, and thank you once again. I'll put the for the freebie, jennings.photo/branding.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Natalie, and thanks so much to everybody for tuning into the show today. I know you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you same time, same place. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It was great.